Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast, where I'm continuing the education in the Zettelkasten. I've been working on a minimalist series, but this podcast is not minimalist at all. It's the opposite direction. I'm dealing with a subject that I've mentioned several times, but today I ran into a perfect example that would let me illustrate it. And that is the question of how you can use a foundational book to establish the structure of your Zettelkasten. When it's first getting underway or when you're first going into a new subject matter, a good foundational book can establish a structure for you so that you don't have to fret over how the Zettelkasten is going to fall into place. I've mentioned this several times, but I've got a perfect example for illustrating how that can be done. And the interesting part is that the book that you're reading, that you're taking notes on, does not need to be the foundational book. You merely have to have access to the foundational book, and you need to be able to just see the structure in the foundational book. And for the example that I'm going to use is a book that I'm working with for my Minimalist Pop video series, and that is the book 12 Life Lessons from St. Thomas Aquinas. Now, I have an example set up for you and ready at the down-facing camera, so without further ado, why don't we head over there and I'll show you what I mean. Now, the way this example came about was that I was working on my homework for the homework assignment that I gave to my followers in my minimalist series on how to get a Zettelkasten going in the fewest number of steps that's still a truly viable functional Zettelkasten. And so I gave my students the assignment to pick 3 books in very diverse areas of their future reading plan and make bib cards from each, some bib notes, enough to be able to make 3 or 4 main cards from each of the 3 books. So I was working on my homework because I'm not going to ask my students to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. And as a matter of fact, in the video lesson, I went over how to make this bib card with them. And this morning I was working on my notes, and I developed enough notes that would suffice for me to make some main cards to go with the lesson. And in particular, I have this main card, which is about the cardinal virtues, and St. Thomas Aquinas says that they have 3 parts. Now, this gets rather technical, so I won't go into the contents of the card, but it's very deep into the subject matter. And one of the reasons I'm using this card with my minimalists is I want to let my minimalist students know that they can create a main card that's at a more general level than the particular card that they're into. And each of my 3 example books will provide examples of that very thing. But working with this, I realized that this was also a fantastic opportunity to illustrate how you can use a foundational book to create the structure into which you can put a card when your Zettelkasten is very new or when you are opening up a whole new area of study. And so I thought this is a great opportunity to develop those cards and show you how you can do that. So this is a rather specific book, so I wanted to choose one in the same subject area that is about as general as it could possibly be, and that was this book. This book has the advantage that it is very structured, and it's very easy to see the structure and to build cards using that structure. And for this reason, I thought it was an excellent illustrative example. We know from the work that we did in the Adler series that even if the structure isn't laid out for you in great detail, you can deduce the structure of the book from the table of contents and from the way the chapters are organized. It just happens to be very clearly laid out in this one, which makes it a really great example to use. So the first thing that I needed to do, and what I'm trying to stress with this, is we're going to be making a series of main cards. We're not using title cards. Title cards are dead and have no power to interact with anything. All of our cards need to be conversational. And so I began with the most general main card that I could make. And for me, I made this rather personal main card that simply expressed my feelings about it. And I also provided a tagline that expresses how I want this whole material to relate to me. So this is actually my main card, and because it is the most foundational main card, it automatically gets the number 1. I could dig through the table of contents, which is quite thick, and determine all of the structure from there. But the next thing that I noticed quite readily from the introduction is that the book is divided into 4 main parts. Well, that gives me the directory cards that I need to go with my main card. But I'll want to know a little bit more than that. I'll want to know where I'm headed with the card that I'm trying to add, because I'm not going to suddenly stop and spend however long it takes to go through this whole book, this whole foundational book. Instead, I'm going to chart a path that leads me to where this card goes. Flipping through the table of contents, it was easy to see that this card would fit in very nicely in this section, whatever that section was. So now I can work backwards to see what part of the book that section is in. It turns out it's in part 3. So knowing where I'm heading, the introduction tells me that the book is divided into these 4 parts, and I can see clearly that part 3 is going to be the part that will contain the card that I'm looking for. So I can make a directory card to go with my card 1. And what my directory card is just in the A, B, C, D for 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D for the 4 parts. And I began with each of the 4 parts, just their title in pencil. But I know I want a main card for this topic C. So I created a main card based on a personal reflection as I thought about this topic, and I used a quote from the Bible and my reaction to it, and I created a tagline. Now this tagline is going to cover everything that I will learn in this part 3 when I flesh the whole thing out. So this is my 1C card. So now my tagline is ready to be included on my directory card, although I'll leave the other 3 that I'm not expanding right now with just the chapter names written in pencil, because they're just titles and I don't really have cards to go with them, but I've given them their structural space based on how the book is organized. See how that's happening? That's the first stage. So the book topic as a whole got a main card made for it that covers the topic as a whole for me personally. I identified the 4 big divisions in the book, and for the one I need to go for, I made a main card that covered that whole division in my mind and have a tagline for that. Now I need to go deeper. So at this point, I need to do a brief perusal of part 3, which is where my subject is. And in that perusal, I have to look at how that is structured so I can determine how this is broken down, so I can build the structure to prepare for fleshing this out. And I find from this structure that there's going to be 2 sections to this. I can verify that from the table of contents. In the table of contents in part 3, I see there's a section 1 and a section 2, and there are no other sections. So I can make a directory card to go with my 1C with those 2 sections. I'll leave the second section, which I don't need to expand right now, with just in pencil the section title written in pencil to be expanded at some point in the future. And I know that I'm going to be working from this section 1 where I'm aiming for the virtues. So now I don't just want a title, I want a main card. To set myself up for the main card, I use this introductory paragraph in this section as a topic, subject matter of a main card, applied my reaction, indicated where I got the material, and created a tagline for it, which stands for this entire section on man's vocation. So now I was able to take another look at 1C's directory card and supply my tagline to cover this first subject matter for 1C1. I'm leaving the 1C2 in pencil because I have not yet developed that line, and I don't need to develop it at this point, but I'm just establishing the structure. Now I need to go deeper into this first section to aim towards the virtues. So I have to say, okay, how does this section get subdivided? And I find that this section is broken down into 3 chapters. Chapter 1, which will be 1C1A, Chapter 2, which will be 1C1B, and Chapter 3, which will be 1C1C. Because where I'm headed is in the first chapter, that's going to be the one I need to expand. So I need to go to Chapter 1 and begin to work on that, build up a main card for that one. And here in this opening paragraph, they detail all of the articles that they're going to cover. It's hard to read in this, but it's all broken down into a number of bullet points, and I captured each of those onto a card. Well, that gives me a very easy directory card here, and in fact, these are all correspond to different article numbers that you can see over here in the table of contents, Article 1, 2, 3, and on to this one I'm headed for, Article 7, which is my topic, and Article 8 closes it. So here are the 8, and I have I needed to go to a second card for this in order to be able to include my reaction and the last point of the chapter, but this gives me a really easy directory card for 1C1A. 1C1A is going to have basically just the title of each of those 8 articles, and one I'm going to have to expand to make a real main card. The others will remain in pencil, and now I'm going to expand this one. Now, this one is a little difficult to see because it goes from the bottom of one page to the top of the other, but I made a main card for it with the information that I wanted to get out of that paragraph and my reaction to it, and supplied it with a tagline. Now that I had my tagline, I could come back to this card 1C1A, replace the pencil article title with my tagline. And now, at long last, after all of those levels, I would be ready to add my new main card, which would select this card as its parent. So this new main card could simply be 1C1A-7A. So what I want to review with you now you can see all of the levels of cards that I created to get down to where I needed to go. One was broken down and I needed to expand section C. Section C was broken down and I need 1C1. 1C1 was broken down and I needed 1C1A. 1C1A was broken down and I needed 1C1A-7. I created card 1C1A-7, which was now the perfect parent for my new card. So as you can see, I was able to take one random card as though it were the very first card in my system and slot it in perfectly where it would go in a highly structured Zettelkasten. If you really wanted that highly structured Zettelkasten, you can now see how you could get it from a foundational book. And I did not have to read the entire foundational book. Basically, I just had to concentrate on one header topic to go with each of these cards and study the structure to make the appropriate breakdown so that my new card would fit in where it's going to go. Now, I'm not writing the number in on this because I'm going to use this same card with my minimalist students, and I assure you we are not going to break it down at this level. This is very advanced. Well, I can assure you that I'm not going to go into all that detail with my minimalist students. I think that does not qualify as minimal. That's a very advanced topic, but it does show you that you really, really can use a foundational book to set the structure of your Zettelkasten and slot a new idea right in where it goes if that level of structure is important to you and meaningful to you. We are all individual human beings, and this pathway that we're on is the Zettelkasten of your dreams. The minimalist is getting a very simple Zettelkasten without too many choices being offered so that we can get past the rigmarole, and people who tend to overthink and make things more complex than they need to be so that it can be very simple. But the wildest dreams goes the other way and says, okay, here's all the alternatives open to you. How do you want to construct your dream Zettelkasten? And so you're going to want to construct your dream Zettelkasten based on the level of structure that you want or need. If you don't need that structure at all, there would be nothing whatsoever wrong with giving this card number 1, and the whole rest of it would slot in. It would, I promise you, it would slot in. It wouldn't look as organized, but all the conversations would be together. All of the right ideas that need to mix would mix just as well. The numbers wouldn't be laid out so structurally as you would get if you used a foundational book. That's a preference. It's still going to function the same way because it's still going to intermix ideas, whether or not the numbers are 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, the way you would want them to do, or whether it starts out 1 and then bigger stuff comes down below and littler stuff goes up to the, if just totally developing organically, you're still going to end up with directory cards that have similar conversations. And that's where the magic happens, is on those directory cards where the conversations start popping out. It does not really matter. It's a preference. It's a preference. And so this is how to do that if that is your choice. So that's part of what Zettelkasten of Your Wildest Dreams is about, is educating you to the choices that are available. Whereas the minimalist is, let's say, okay, let's just get a Zettelkasten working, see how it happens, see it in action, see it developing ideas, and then you can make other choices later as well. So you're never trapped in a corner with your Zettelkasten. Zeke here is proof of that. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.